So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Princeton Public Library. We're so glad that you chose to spend part of your evening here with us in the community room. My name is Janie Herman. I'm the manager of adult programming. It's a true pleasure to see such a good crowd gathered tonight as we continue our celebration of Women's History Month with a conversation that bridges culture, economics, and the power of women's voices. Finally, we'd like to extend our sincere thanks to Labyrinth Books of Princeton for being both our partner for this event as well as our bookseller. And so at the end of the event, you will be able to get a signed copy of the book. Now it's my honor to introduce our guest. We are delighted to welcome economist, professor, and author Misty Heggeness here to discuss her new book, Swiftynomics, How Taylor Swift's Power and Influence Are Changing the World. In Swiftynomics, the author takes what many might see as a pop culture phenomenon and reveals something much deeper, a compelling economic case study in women's labor, value, and power. Using the career of Taylor Swift as the lens, the book explores themes of pay equity, intellectual property, gender bias, market influence, and the measurable economic impact of women's work. From record-breaking tours that reshape local economies to the fight for ownership of creative output, Swiftynomics shows how one artist's career illuminates broader structural forces that shapes women's financial lives. The book has already drawn enthusiastic praise. It's been described as a smart, accessible examination of power, label, and gender in the modern economy, and is a work that transforms a cultural phenomenon into a masterclass on how women create and claim economic value. Misty Heggeness is a professor of public affairs and economics at the University of Kansas, where her research focuses on gender, labor markets, and public policy. She previously served as principal economist at the U.S. Census Bureau and as a senior advisor within the federal government, working extensively on issues of pay equity, caregiving, and the economic realities facing women and families. Known for translating complex data into compelling and relatable narratives, she brings both rigorous scholarship and cultural insight to her work. Tonight, we have the opportunity to not only consider the economic ripple effects of a global superstar, but also to reflect more broadly on how women's contributions, creative, intellectual, and economic, are valued in our society. So please join me in warmly welcoming Misty Heggeness to the Princeton Public Library.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here today. I am Misty Heggeness, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my book, and I might just hold this because I like to walk around. Before I get started, I have a lecture that I'm going to present here that is really focused on something fun that Taylor Swift does that I think is demonstrative of the ways in which she incorporates women's economic power into her own work and her own lifestyle. And it's just a small component of everything that's in the book. So I just want to be upfront with that. And then I also just wanted to ask if anybody is comfortable enough letting us know why you're here today. And I'm asking because I've given a talk about A, and then at the end when we're doing the Q&A, somebody says, oh, I really want to know about B. And so I'm interested in knowing what those B's are ahead of time because maybe I can cover them in the talk. So if anybody wants to say, hey, I'm here and I'm super duper interested in X related to Taylor Swift, now's your chance to speak up. Or Y related to women in the economy. If not, I'll just take it away on my own path. All right, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to start, I think the best way to really understand the role of Taylor Swift as a muse in this book in describing women in the economy today is to start with going back in time to when Taylor was an adolescent and was trying to get into the music business and specifically into country music. Before I do that, I want to just mark what I'm defining as Swiftynomics because it can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. When you hear Swiftynomics, you could think about, and lots of people think about, the huge influence Taylor has had as she has traipsed around the globe and around the U.S. On her Eras tour. Gymming around lots of money that was really brought into local communities when the Eras tour took place in those communities. What I want to highlight, and I've spoken about this quite a bit, is this idea that I don't actually think it's Taylor Swift that's all economically powerful. And she is fantastic, amazing, creative, and she's really, really talented at what she does. But when I saw all of the excitement and joy and energy that took place with the Eras tour, my immediate thought wasn't, oh, look at how economically powerful Taylor is. My first thought was, look at how economically powerful Swifties are and Taylor Swift fans are. And so Swiftynomics, for me, this book, while Taylor Swift is the muse, it's really a book in honor of women today. And what I'm trying to do is reframe or reshape the way that we think about women as economic agents, both today and also throughout history. So for me, Swiftynomics is the power of harnessing women's experiences and voices, making them, moving them from invisible to visible, and the way in which those experiences and voices advance economic growth, development, and equity. And so I talk a lot in the book about how oftentimes there's work that women do that goes ignored or is taken for granted in society. And my best example, and then we'll start talking about Taylor Swift as an adolescent. But my best example of this is if we think about labor force participation, we know that, if you look at men with children, it's above 95% who are working for pay in the labor market. Women with children, it's between 60 and 70%. And now, actually, these days, it's up around 74, 75. So if you were to look at those statistics, 97% for fathers, 73% for mothers, you might come to a conclusion that men are more economically active than women. But if we use time use data and we actually look at the amount of time during a day that men spend in economic activity relative to the amount of time women spend in economic activity in a given day, regardless of whether or not that economic activity is paid for, what we find in the data is that women are produce 1 hour more of economic activity every single day relative to men, which means men have 1 hour more of leisure every day relative to women. And that might not seem like much. That's making dinner, washing a load of clothes, what have you. But you add that up over the course of a year, and that's about 2 to 2.5 months of additional economic activity that women are doing relative to men every year. And if you want to, I always say, if you want to get angry about it, you flip it and say that's an extra 2 to 2.5 months of leisure time that men have relative to women. So what I'm trying to do with this book, and then we'll get into the fun Swifty stuff, but what I'm trying to do with this book is to really disentangle these statistics that we've also often looked at traditionally through the view of people in spaces of power, which generally tend to be men historically over time, and trying to reframe that so that we're actually really capturing all of the ways in which women are economically awesome. All right, so getting back to Taylor, I basically describe Taylor's success in using 3 different main themes. And all of this is layered by the fact that she is a woman in a very male-dominated profession. The first area, or the first theme, is authenticity. And it goes something like this. So let's go back to Taylor as a teenager. This was from her music video. Anybody in here a Swiftie or a Taylor Swift fan? Yes, okay. Anybody know what music video this is from? I'm not going to be able to remember off the top of my head, but which one is it? It's like it's not Long Live, but it's like one of the. Yes, You Belong with Me. Okay. So this is a song that Taylor wrote. Is it on the debut album? It's on one of her first albums when she was still doing country music. So it's either on debut or Fearless or something. And here she lives next door to a boy, and she's looking out her window at the boy. And he is in love with some girl who doesn't treat him very nicely. And he is friends with Taylor. And Taylor wants to have more than a friendship with this guy, but he doesn't see her as anything more than a friend. And so that's the gist of the story of this song. And so this is Taylor when she was younger in her teenage years. And what she's doing here is writing lyrics and songs that she then sings about other young white teenage women. And she's writing about real experiences that many of them have had or might have coming up. And so this authentic way of writing, where she's writing about experiences from her own perspective, her own lived perspective, builds up a very authentic strategy in terms of connecting with fans. And Taylor, so the story behind how she got started is she signed with RCA in a development contract. And a development contract in the music industry means they're not going to produce albums for you. They're not going to let you go out on tour. They're just going to continue to develop you until they think you're ready, and then they will let you start producing music and albums. And Taylor was 14, and she didn't want to be on a development contract. She wanted to she was writing lots of songs, and she wanted to sing those songs and push those songs out. So she did something relatively risky. I mean, if you want to be a singer and you're on an RCA contract, developmental contract, it's pretty brave of you to break that contract and do something else. And that's exactly what she did. She broke the contract with RCA, and she went off with an individual who was starting his own firm called Big Machine. His name was Scott B. I'm not going to say his last name because I say it like the appetizer. But she went off and she signed up to start working on with Scott B. and his new label Big Machine. And the reason why she broke her RCA contract and went and moved over to work with Scott was because Scott said, "I will let you write your own music. I will let you sing your own music, produce your own music on the albums that you want, and I will let you do it your way." So that's what Taylor ended up doing. And all along the way, she was growing up in a time when social media was expanding. And so what Taylor did when she was very young is she got on what was it first called MySpace or something like this. She was in the first of the first generations of social media, interacting with fans, interacting with other girls like her. And I'll point out a couple of things. One is that I'm pretty sure that today RCA really, they basically put her on a developmental contract because one of the reasons was they didn't think that there was a market in country music for writing songs about young white teenage girls for other young white teenage girls. And I'm pretty sure that today RCA Music is probably kicking themselves in the shin for not recognizing the economic value of these young women. So Taylor goes off and she makes her own music, and she connects with her fans on social media. And she does things like when she decides she wants to switch out of country music and move into pop, something that had never really been done before by women. She does something that she called secret sessions. Does anybody know what the secret sessions were? Yes. Okay. So you want to tell us, or? Yes, it was a great honor. And so just as Taylor's fans stalk her, she's kind of also known for stalking her fans. So she spent a lot of time in her younger years really getting to know her audience and really getting to know her fans. So much so that when she decided to switch over into pop, she did these secret sessions where she individually invited fans that she found on social media who had been following her and were clearly like super fans. And she invited them to a secret listening session in her home. She did this in Los Angeles. She did this in New York and Nashville, and I don't know where else. I think there's one other place. And again, this gets at her authenticity. So her fans showed up. Her and her mom made them cookies. The fans were so excited. 1989 was a big hit. We know that that's where all of her like very, very famous songs, you know, Shake It Off, and those songs I think come from that. So her authenticity really has driven her ability to keep her fans close to her and dedicated to her. I'm going to go through this a little bit faster here to make sure we get done in time, but this is Clara Bow. Clara was born in New York in 1905, and to a mother who didn't want children and a father who was an alcoholic. Clara was really, really good at acting, just naturally good at acting, and a movie producer saw her act in New York and offered her a train ticket to take a train to LA and offered her a contract with Paramount Picture. So she decided to take him up on that, and she took the train to LA, and she worked for Paramount, and she made a lot of money for them. And one of the movies that made them a lot of money was this movie, It, and it was a silent movie. And so Clara was called the It Girl, and she was very famous at the time. She had lots of power because of her fame in acting. And when her contract was up for renewal, Clara negotiated a better contract. She negotiated more money in her contract. She negotiated a stipend for her father, who was helping her and assisting her in her home. She had brought him to LA by then. But she also did something that had never been done before by any other actor. She was able to negotiate the removal of a clause in her contract. And the nickname of this clause is called a slut clause. But essentially, it's a clause that says, if you ever show up unfavorably in the news media, we have the right to null and void the contract and not work with you anymore. And she was able to get that removed. And it's very common for women in the industry to be shamed because of their romantic relationships. And the same thing happened for Clara, but Clara was able to keep her contract when it did happen. So she showed up in the news media, in the media unfavorably at the time, but she was able to stay in her contract. Taylor Swift has a song called Clara Bow that's written about Clara Bow. And if you notice, there are similarities here in terms of Clara's audacity to ask for what she wants, her ability to negotiate herself into a better position. These are things that Taylor Swift does as well today. And again, this is in this theme of authenticity. As Taylor aged, so she aged into her 20s. In her 20s, she dated a lot. She got a lot of backlash from in the public media about her dating. And when Taylor gets a little bit older, she stops relying on these lived stories of youthfulness, although she still writes about stories of that have to do with feelings and love and betrayal and whatever. But she also starts writing songs about women from history that have influenced her, that she over-identifies with. So Clara Bow is one of them. Adina Sackville is another. Adina Sackville had the nickname of the Bolter because she married and divorced, I think 4 times. And her first marriage, she had 2 children, 2 boys, and she left the 2 boys with her ex-husband, and she married a naval guy, and they moved. And she was from high society in London in the early 1920s or the early 1900s. And you can see that, she's also spoken about negatively in social media, I guess newspapers are social media of the time. But in the newspapers, in the social columns, love failures of the Countess. I think this guy right here is the last guy that she ended up marrying. That relationship didn't work out, but they never divorced. And so he went away, and then she had another relationship. And so she was nicknamed the Bolter because she bolts from relationships. Taylor Swift has a song called The Bolter. And it's not only that Taylor over-identifies with these women of the past in terms of their life experiences. Taylor also embeds these muses that she has into her artistry beyond just the songs. So this right here is Taylor. Anybody know what music video that's from? Just say it. You know it. Oh, Fortnite. Yes, it's Fortnite. It's from the music video Fortnite. And you can see that she's mimicked the eyebrows and the same style of these women of the early 1920s. So one of the things that Taylor does so well is, she has it's really hard to be female in a male-dominated industry. It's really hard to keep up your push and your drive when there's negative things that may be being said about you, or when people don't expect you to want to be a boss and you want to be a boss, etc. And so Taylor, I think, looks back at these muses as a way of trying to keep up her strength in pushing herself forward in her career. This is Rebecca Harkness. Rebecca Harkness was born in St. Louis, Missouri. She got married and divorced in St. Louis, and then she met a rich oil man and married him, and they moved to Rhode Island. And they bought this house. This house is called the Holiday House. And Rebecca, basically, they would have lots of parties there. And Rebecca's husband wasn't very healthy. And the doctor said he needed to stop having parties and needed to settle down. And they didn't do that, and he ended up dying. And everybody in this local community blamed Rebecca for his death because, as his wife, she should have kept better care of her spouse and not let him party so much so that he would be healthier. Taylor Swift wrote a song about Rebecca Harkness. That song is called The Last Great American Dynasty. And so if you listen to that song, you'll hear the story of Rebecca. Rebecca was a widow for a long time. She started a ballet company in this house. She would play cards in this house with Salvador Dali and BKS Iyengar. Eventually, Rebecca moved to New York. The house sat vacant for a while, and then somebody purchased it after Rebecca's death. Somebody purchased it from the Harkness estate. Anybody know who purchased it? Taylor Swift purchased it. So not only does she write songs about these women and over-identify with them by dressing up like them in her music video, she also buys their homes and then parties at them. So Taylor Swift bought Rebecca's home, and Taylor is known for having 4th of July parties with a lot of her girlfriends at this home in Rhode Island, Holiday House. And this picture up here on the top is Taylor with Selena and the Ham sisters and 2 other people I don't recognize. And she posted that along with this statement right here, Happy Belated Independence Day, see you soon, Kansas City. That was right before she went to Kansas City to perform in the Eras Tour. And I was lucky enough to go to night 1 of Kansas City Eras Tour. So what I want to point out here, and then I'll do one more thing about authenticity, and then I'll move on to reinvention. But what I want to point out here is that Taylor really does try to live based on authentic experiences of what it's like to be her, of what it's like for women in her industry. And she does a really, really good job of using these examples as strength to not get caught up in a lot of the kind of misogynistic behavior in the industry about what other people's expectations of her should be and what she should do. So, and her authenticity not only means that she's able to stay brave and bold and continue down the path that she wants to do, but it also means that she's got a whole herd of super dedicated fans who are willing to protect her and will do a lot to do for that protection of her. So just to mention, Elizabeth Taylor is another famous woman of the past who Taylor over-identifies with. Elizabeth Taylor also had relationships, and she had an on and off relationship with, forgetting his name. Yes, thank you. Richard Burton. Elizabeth had some kids. She was the first woman to ever get a $1 million contract to be in a movie. Does anyone know what movie it was? Yes, Cleopatra. And she got a lot of shade for that. People were saying she was paid too much, et cetera, et cetera. But again, Taylor is drawn to these women of the past who fought for, negotiated for and fought for what they felt like they deserved, unabashedly. These are pictures of, on the left is Elizabeth Taylor, and on the right is Taylor Swift in different music videos. And this type of artistry that she does is fun, makes it all a little bit more fun. And she's had some success around it. And if you know all of these little things that she's doing, you're intrigued by them. And if you don't know them, you still have fun watching the music videos anyway and listening to the music. Reinvention is the second theme. And Taylor is the queen of reinvention. So her entire career has persisted by reinventing herself. She switched from country music into pop. Then she went into indie music. She had a couple of episodes in kind of the internet social square where people really started attacking her. And her response was to reinvent herself. There's a speech that she gives where she says, "You tell me I date too much, so then I stop dating entirely. Then you tell me blah, blah, blah." And she talks about how she has this back and forth with kind of the larger community around shifting and shaping herself, molding herself to meet the expectations of the larger public until she no longer really cares anymore and she just starts doing what she wants to do. But this idea of reinvention, well, I'll mention two areas where Taylor has reinvented, or three actually, but this idea of reinvention is something that is such a common human experience, but one of the things that Taylor has really uniquely and successfully done is call it out in a very explicit way. So the Eras tour and living, from era to era is all about reinvention. For this book, we surveyed, my team at University of Kansas, we surveyed over 300 people, asking them, adults, asking them, have you ever had to reinvent your career path? And nationally representative, it's about 90% of individuals who have at one point in time had to reinvent their career path. And it's the same for men and women. So everybody, 9 out of 10 people have to have reinvented at some point along their path. It's just such a normal human experience. Where it diverges by gender is that women reinvent more often. And so you imagine the scenario where women are reinventing more often because it's more of a tight fit for them to balance work life and have children, et cetera, et cetera. So this idea of reinvention is so common. It's such a human experience, yet Taylor has really used it to her advantage. Nowadays you hear everybody say, "Oh, I'm in my X era," or in marketing for businesses, you'll see so and so is, this item is in its whatever era. When Taylor Swift came out with the The Life of a Showgirl, all of these products went shiny orange, right? Like Sharpie pens went shiny orange. And so there's this idea of having eras, and reinventing is now something that is easily recognizable, really because of Taylor, even though we all do it. So this is in the 2009 MTV Music Awards. This male singer got up on stage, and after Taylor won the award, and basically said, he thought Beyoncé should have won the award. And that was really devastating for Taylor. And he continues to, he had another episode where and I talk about these in the book, but where he kind of went after Taylor and sang about her in one of his songs. And that was a really devastating experience for Taylor. But she came back from all of that through reinvention, and she came out with the album Reputation in response. There's also, Taylor has a sexual assault story, just like most women do, many women do. She was in a photo shoot, and a Colorado DJ put his hand up her skirt. He was fired for doing that, and then he sued her for being fired. And I love this quote from Taylor, which was during the court case. She didn't settle out of court. She went to court. And she said, "I'm not going to allow your client to make me feel like it is in any way my fault, because it isn't. I'm being blamed for the unfortunate events of his life that are a product of his decisions, not mine." And so this idea of being able to reinvent yourself as a way of pulling yourself out of really negative situations or bad spots is something that Taylor has done in the past, and it's something that we often do. And then just going back to the 1989 secret listening sessions in her homes, this was a reinvention, moving out of country music and into pop music. Yeah, and so this right here is from one of the music videos, Look What You Made Me Do, on the Reputation album. And these are like 13 or 15 different Taylors. She was continually having to reinvent herself to stay relevant and to stay present and to stay successful within the music industry. It's also, in addition to just persistence, it's an example of, grit, and it's a really good example of when you do have to reinvent, it's not always that you move into a worse position. Many times, your reinvention moves you into a better space than you previously were at, even though you might not think that that's what's going to happen in the moment. This is, again, Taylor just leaning into this idea of reinvention. That's the poster from the Eras Tour. And those are all of the different eras of those are pictures of all of the different eras of Taylor. Her most recent eras are the Tortured Poets Department over on the left, and The Life of a Showgirl, which again, she's moving back into pop. If you follow Swifty lore, this is a trilogy. These two albums are the only albums that start with "the," and the Swifty lore tells us that the third album is coming out this year, 2026, and that it's supposedly a rock album. So we'll see if that happens, and it'll start with the word "the," but that's the word on the street. Okay, so she's very authentic, which helps her capture her customer and keep them engaged in what she's doing. She continually reinvents to stay fresh and to stay alive. She's also said multiple times that she never expected to be out on stage and producing music past the age of 25, that she felt like there was a cap on what the music industry and what society would put up with in terms of female singers, and she's still going. The third theme I want to really highlight and emphasize is this idea of masterminding. And masterminding is really just thinking about the long game. So there's lots of the way that I think about society and all of us humans interacting with each other is that we all we believe we have a position of power, and then other people around us believe that we have a certain position of power based on what they perceive of us. And lots of times what happens with women in the workplace or women in society is there is an assumption that the position of power is, not the dominant. And, but it doesn't have to be a gender perspective. It could be any perspective. And so say, for example, you are in your workplace. You really, really have a strong desire. Your authentic self wants to get to point A in your workplace. You have a supervisor who doesn't believe that you have the skills or capacity to get to A. And so they're not going to invest in you. The likelihood of them promoting you to that space is really, really small. But you're kind of stuck because you need them in order to get to that point A. And if you follow kind of Taylor's logic and how she's lived her career, you might have to sit with that. You might have to sit in that space for the short run. There's not much you can do to convince your supervisor to believe in you if they don't. I mean, there are things you could do, but that's a really hard path. Alternatively, what you could do is you could really focus on what is a long-term strategy that would be more viable for me to get me to that A. And maybe that's you find yourself a couple of mentors. Maybe that is you start applying for other jobs. Maybe that is you look around in the organization if you can do a parallel move in, to be in a position where you're supervised by somebody who does believe in you and would help you move up. That's what masterminding is. And one of the things that I think is really brilliant about Taylor is she is literally the queen of masterminding. Taylor's ability to mastermind allowed her to buy back all 6 of her first albums, which were sold away from her. I'm not sure how much I should get into that story, but Taylor's first 6 albums of her catalog were sold to Scooter Braun, and then he sold them to some other company. And Taylor was really public about it, how frustrated she was about it. If you watch the music video for The Man, you can see she's in a subway and there's a sign that says no scooters, and that's a reference to Scooter Braun. And so Taylor was really frustrated that her music got sold out from under her and that she couldn't maintain control of it. And that happened. Does anybody know what year that happened? Was it 2017 or 18 or 19, something like that? Now, in 2025, she was actually, through the Eras Tour, she earned enough money to be able to buy back those first 6 albums. Okay, that's an example of masterminding. So she had to set herself up in a position where she could become successful enough and generate enough revenue and earnings to be able to afford to buy back those masters. And she couldn't do that immediately. That took a lot of strategizing on her part. She does consider herself a queen mastermind person. This is the stage at the Eras Tour, and Taylor's in the middle singing. And this is essentially a chessboard, and all of her dancers are like pawns on the chessboard. So she is metaphorically representing, and she's singing the song Mastermind as the floor of her set is doing this. Again, this is just going back to, she was finally able to, in May of 2025, she told everyone that she was finally able to buy back the rights to her first 6 albums. And the way that she did it was very authentically. So she was trying to figure out how she was going to approach the company that owned, that Scooter Braun had sold her albums to. And she decided, and this is in one of the docuseries that she has done, she decided to all she was going to do, because for her it wasn't about the money. She will tell you, at least publicly, that she wanted her legacy to stay in her family. And so she felt like her children should be able to control the rights to the music that she wrote, not somebody else. And that's why she wanted the music back. And so after the Eras Tour, during the last leg of the Eras Tour, when they were trying to decide how they could approach the company and negotiate with this company, it's Shamrock something is the company, to buy back the music, her strategy was she sent her mom and her brother to negotiate for her with the executives at Shamrock. And the reason why she did that was because she wanted to really reinforce with them that it wasn't about the money for her. It wasn't that she wanted to buy these back for some sort of financial incentive. She wanted to buy them back because it was a part of her legacy and a part of, and that she believed that it should stay in the family. And has anyone listened to the song Father Figure on the Life of a Showgirl? Okay. If you're not a Taylor Swift fan, if you go to, if you listen after we leave here, on the Life of a Showgirl, which is her latest album, there's a song called Father Figure. Listen to the lyrics of Father Figure, or even read the lyrics of Father Figure. But in it, Taylor does something that she is so good at doing, which is she basically, the first 2 minutes, she's singing the song, and you assume Father Figure is Scott B. Buscetta, or whatever his name is. And then right at minute 2, she flips it, and she's still singing about Father Figure, but it's actually, she's the Father Figure. And so it's so, yeah. If you have ever experienced what it feels like to be an underdog, those songs have so much like joy and meaning for you that, you know, just like that she, and again, music is so relatable to so many people because she's able to write, you know, sing these stories of her lived experiences in a way that's generalizable enough. I do want to stop so there's time for Q&A, but I want to just point out, so Claudia Golden is the first woman to win the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in economics, alone, without, not next to any other co-authors. And so first, female only. She won it in 2023. And the day that she won the Nobel Prize in October of 2023, she published a paper in the MBER working paper series titled Why Women Won. And at the time, you know, Dobbs was still pretty fresh. Reproductive rights were kind of under attack. Lots of things were happening, and lots of us felt like women weren't winning. But Claudia has this whole story, and I use it as a stepping stone in my book when I write about generations and when I write about motherhood. The story goes like this. Claudia will tell you that the majority of laws and policies that happened that gave women, advanced women's equality and gave women equal rights happened during the civil rights era. And there's a couple of things that happened before the civil rights era, however. In 1920, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. This handsome gentleman, Harry Byrne, was a legislator in the Tennessee state legislate. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. He was the deciding vote in which Tennessee voted to ratify the 19th Amendment, and Tennessee was the last state to vote, and so they were the last state to ratify. And if Tennessee would have voted not in favor, women would not have been given the right to vote. So Harry essentially was the last guy standing who gave women the right to vote. And does anybody know why Harry voted yes? He's a conservative young guy. He wasn't married at the time, 24 years old. All right. Harry's mom told him to do it. This is Feb Byrne. And so, this is the letter from her saying, be a good boy, help Mrs. So-and-so with her rats, and rats was short for ratifications. So Harry's on record saying he voted for it because his mom told him to. And that was in 1920. And so the argument here, and I'm building off of Claudia's argument about why women won, is that when we are not in positions of power or able to advance ourselves, we work behind the curtain. And that was Feb working behind the curtain. In 1940s, you have the Lanham Act, World War II. Women, families had access to universal childcare because the men were off at war and the women had to go into the factories to work. And when the Lanham Act, when the World War II ended, universal childcare went away. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead here because I want to leave time. But that was in the 1940s, and this is mothers' labor force participation. And it was lower in 1940 than it was in 1950 or 1960. So even though moms were expected to go back in the home and stop working for pay, not all of them did. And in fact, those mothers then encouraged their children to get an education. So you see an accelerated college attendance and college graduation rates of the children of Rosie the Riveters. And I'll leave you with this, which is there's a ripple effect that happens with women in society when we can hang on to these little bits and pieces of both empowerment and spaces that allow us to really support each other and thrive. We end up creating these waves of change over time. And so all of those historical changes, and again, the whole middle section of my book goes into depth on the historical pieces. But all of these efforts rippled over time, made it possible for a 14-year-old girl in 2003 to walk door to door in Nashville, Tennessee, trying to get a record deal. And it created space for her mom to get a college education. Her mom went somewhere in Texas and has an MBA, I think. Step away from work once her kids were born and have a very successful career within the entertainment industry as a momager. This is, and so Andrea is Taylor's mom. This is Andrea's mom. Does anybody know her name? No, but it's a good guess. Her name is Marjorie, and Taylor has a song called Marjorie in honor of her mother, her maternal grandmother. Marjorie was an opera singer, and she was a famous TV host in Puerto Rico. So Taylor's mom, and if you watch the 6-part docuseries on Disney Plus, which I recommend you all do, it's a masterclass in women's leadership, masterclass. Andrea talks about how growing up with a mom who was an opera singer and in entertainment really trained her to be able to really be an effective momager for her daughter in the music industry. I haven't talked about others besides Taylor, but in the book I go into stories about Madonna, Dolly Parton, and I love Beyonce's story. Beyonce is also a queen of reinvention. And I'll quickly just say that Beyonce was on the Country Music Awards with the Dixie Chicks in year, I don't know what. And the country music industry and country music radio refused to play one of Beyonce's songs. It was called, I think it was called Daddy Issues, but I'm not sure. It was on Lemonade, on her album Lemonade. And it was very controversial, and basically she was shunned out of country music. And that 8 years later, Beyonce came back with Cowboy Carter. And she finally got an award at the Country Music Awards. She got like either best album or best song, I can't remember. And so that's, again, this idea of reinvention, being persistent, and also masterminding. Beyonce is a queen at masterminding. It's not taking no for an answer. And this is how I'm arguing women have thrived within our economy over generations, and how we will continue to be successful against the odds. And that's my next slide is a thank you slide. So, but I'll stop there, and if there's any questions.
Okay, so the question's about Taylor's dad.
Yeah, Taylor, I mean, both of her parents are awesome. Taylor's dad was, he worked in like JP Morgan or something like that. He did financial investing. You know, her business is a family business. You can be pretty much guaranteed that he's the one doing the investing of all the money they're making today. He's been incredibly supportive of her career. All of her family has. Yeah, which I think has been also critical for Taylor. Yep.
What's the impact of Taylor's tour in real terms when she visits a certain location?
I mean, it's millions of dollars. So like when she was in LA, I think it was $320 million additional revenue that, you know, came into the city through local restaurants, through hotels, through people flying there to see the tour from other places. So it's, you know, she was mentioned in the Beige Book with the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not something that's common. And she was mentioned there because her, when she went to Philadelphia, I think it was, the hotel, cost of hotels went up so high. And Beyoncé is, somebody credited Beyoncé with increasing, temporarily increasing GDP in Sweden for the same reason, because the cost of hoteling and everything went up really high.
Are there other questions?
Thank you so much for the talk today. I found the using Taylor Swift as a case study in Swiftynomics was really interesting in your book and quite compelling. And I recently read Belle Burden's memoir. She wrote that viral modern love essay for the Times. And so I've been thinking a lot about, I suppose, how you can economically safeguard yourself as a woman. And as a professor and economist, I'm curious if there are any critical junctures or stages of life that you think, not just women, I suppose, but like as an individual, we can put a little more emphasis or thought into, because thinking about, people like Taylor Swift or Belle Burden who face a lot of legal or financial vulnerability. Of course, marriage, retirement, those are the big ones, but are there any other points in time that you think we should really give some extra thought to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the components for me that I think about a lot is social policies and kind of our country's really inability to value care and caregiving enough to create social infrastructure for it. You know, we assume it's a private venture. We assume that families, if they're going to have, you know, the typical story, if you're going to have a kid, then that's your response. You know, you got yourself into that situation. You should, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and support your family yourself. That argument doesn't work so well for women today, and especially millennial women and younger. And part of the reason is because they've got higher level of education than any other female generation before them. And so the cost of getting married and having children is much higher for them. They're much more likely to have careers than jobs. Claudia's book will tell you that. And people are partnering up today, not necessarily to complement each other in opposite skill sets, which, like, if you listen to the theories of Gary Becker and household economics, you know, would say, you know, he would tell you that there's this idea of production complementarities where women specialize in domestic household activities and men specialize in being really good at making money outside of the home. And people aren't really partnering up for that reason anymore. It's more, Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers have the best argument that I've heard so far of this. It's like, it's more about consumption complementarities. And so people are partnering up today, lots of times with, you know, somewhat equal levels of education and levels of kind of employment. and they're partnering up more because they like to consume the same thing. So they like to, travel. They both like to travel, or they both like to, et cetera, et cetera. And when you have that situation going on in society, and you have women with much higher levels of education asking them to, or even they themselves trying to make decisions about whether they're going to stop work to have kids or stop work to take care of kids, it's a lot more expensive for them to do that today. And so there's a lot more rationale today than ever for us to have better infrastructure and social policies that support caregiving in society as a kind of communal expectation, and really to acknowledge the value that it has to us as humans to make sure that, we continue to procreate. It's more risky than ever these days to be a woman and to be making decisions about family and finances. But it's also makes it like an interesting time, because that means that women are coming at it from a higher advantage and can have the conversations with their partners before they decide to get married or decide to have children.
Okay.
They have better negotiating.
Another question.
Thank you. So this is a speculation question for
Yeah.
you. So we know Taylor's getting married,
Mm-hmm.
and we know she has a lot more money than her future husband.
Yeah.
And many of the women that you had that she kind of idolized did not do well in marriage and all that. So what do you think her plan is to protect her money, since she's worked so hard to get it?
Well, first I'll say, people ask me all the time about their relationship, and like I don't have any strong feelings either way. If they stay together, awesome. If they don't, I don't really care. They're both like super creative and successful in and of themselves. But what I love about their relationship is Travis is very much like a prime example of the modern man. He is the prime example, I think, of what women who are economically successful are looking for today, in the sense that he's not threatened by her. He's, for sure they have prenups. I mean, there's no, I would bet all the money I own that they have prenups, and they both probably are totally fine with that. They do a lot of like really, really cool cross marketing. And so Travis and his brother, Jason, benefit a lot from Taylor's name and fame, because if you look at New Heights, which is their podcast, they promote Taylor. They say stuff about Taylor all the time on social media. They just started a book club. Two football guys just started a book club, and the first two books that they're reading are books that Taylor has read and publicly is known for reading. And then ironically, like 2 weeks after they announced they're starting a book club, they say, oh, by the way, we're writing a book together and we're going to have it in the book club. And so like, it's so much better to, what I like about them is that they're not competing against each other. They're basically, cross marketing. They both increase their pool of fans. Of course, I think for the Kelseys, they increase theirs a lot more than Taylor's increasing hers. But I mean, I think they'll figure it out, and they seem to have fun together. They're the perfect example of the consumer or consumption complementarities. They appear to both like similar things and like hanging out together, and I'm sure their finances will just remain separate.
Yeah, I think also Jason Kelsey's wife has quite a social media platform, and she also has her own podcast and documenting it. So I think the Kelsey family is quite close with the Swift family, and you're right, they're just marketing off each other at this point.
It's fun to watch, because it's not common that you see, normally when these types of relationships get into the public sphere, they just get annihilated because people just criticize and attack. But they seem to be really, really good at, steering clear of all of that.
Okay, well, thank you for coming to. I really love those three themes of being, authentic and masterminding and reinvention. I think it's a good lesson for anybody, male or female, about how to get through life. And It's been a great talk, a great way to kick off Women's History Month here. And congratulations on such an interesting book, Swiftynomics, and your tour. And thank you for coming to Princeton to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.